Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our 8th Fireside Chat. This time we have a leader that all of you would know, Puneet Chhatwal, the Managing Director and CEO of IHCL. Puneet has sort of studied his hoteliering in India, spent many years in Europe, fine-tuning and developing his skills, developing the Carlson, as development head for Carlson Residor and growing that brand and that company in a big way. Then as CEO of Steigenberger Hotels, and then back to India as CEO of IHCL. He's had a very successful and distinguished career. Puneet, would you like to join us, please?
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Puneet. Thank you for joining us. I have actually skipped doing the housekeeping, which I will therefore take 30 seconds, Puneet. Basically, everybody would like to note that we would be happy to have questions coming in from you. Please post your questions at the places indicated in your, on the screen, depending on which system you're using. Please do not use the raise your hand option because that is something we will not be tracking. And everybody is on mute so that we can have a clear conversation between Puneet and myself. Of course, we've had a lot of questions that have already been posted, and I will try my best to weave in those questions into our conversation. So done with the housekeeping, Puneet. I would like to start by congratulating you and IHCL for the success that you've had in the recognition for the Taj branding as the best global brand in the hotel industry. It's not only a matter of pride for IHCL, no doubt, but even for India and Indian hospitality. And before you respond to that, I'm going to tell you that we're going to start with the subject of discussion on brand, but I'll let you respond first.
No, thank you so much. I think you rightly articulated it. It is a recognition for India more, and we feel very privileged to be a part of it and to be rated as the strongest brand on the global platform from a relatively new independent country, less than 75 years, where hoteliering is not something which has been our background. So I think it is really something very nice for India, especially with all the news that went out after the second wave. Not that this changes the image globally, but definitely with a certain section of the society, that's the 10% of the global workforce, at least it creates a positive impact and image, what I would call it, the branding for India. And on top of that, Tata is getting rated every year as the strongest corporate brand. And last year we were rated as the strongest brand across all sectors in India. This year as number 2 across all sectors, which is a normal thing after the industry was shut for 7 months or 8 months, still to get to number 2 with the Taj brand, of course, not with our corporate brand IHCL. So we are very humbled, very honored, and pleased, not just for us, but for the industry, which goes through such a dramatic and difficult time, both globally as well as on the national front.
Yes, and I, tongue in cheek, I might even say that this news came in the very next day after India had lost the match in the UK against New Zealand. So it was even better heartening news at that point from that perspective. But tell me, this puts a certain element of sort of pleasure, but also pressure, in the sense that you've obviously got to work harder on the brand. But tell me, what does brand mean to you, and what is the interplay between brand, product, service, and other intangibles?
Brand is something that encompasses the whole, as you've described it, and that is also a definition of who you are, also your values. So for us, the Taj brand, we say Taj stands for trust, awareness, and joy. So these are also the three core values of the company. It is representative of the iconic nature of our portfolio. So that's why it was called the Taj Mahal Palace and Tower by Jamshedji Tata way back in the beginning of the 20th century in 1903 when the hotel opened. And the brand is also basically not only defining who you are, but also the purpose. The purpose is considered by many famous leaders these days as the heart of the business. So it stands for the purpose of your business. And really in how you are making that journey, because a property can come and go, a contract can come and go, but brands are there either forever or they disappear. And having had 120 years of track record, I think we always take decisions looking at the next maybe 50 years before we would have said 100 years. But now we say we look at 25 to 50 years as the world is becoming faster paced. We don't take decisions that could, work negatively for the brand in the short term, giving you a gain, but a mid to long term that you lose out. And I think there is no better story than that of Taj, which was always, symbolic, at least on the Indian subcontinent, for who it was and its iconic status, its service, the heart and soul of the employees, the associates. And for some time, when we got very busy on the international front, we kind of, lost our way on the national front. But when we decided to come back, so that's the power of the brand, there was like no looking back. And as if it was people were waiting, what happened? Why did it take you so long to come back? It was more like that than us trying to push. So that's the power of the brand. And I hope our younger brands also will mature the same way as Taj has matured, because all other brands are like less than 20 years in operation, and this one is 120 years, so it's 100 years head start. So I think another 3 to 5 years, at least a second and a third brand from our portfolio will emerge to also be a very, very strong leader.
Which brands would you think there would be? Which brands do you aim those to be? I mean, from a market perspective, what do you think is the biggest opportunity?
I know, but I will not disclose, because then I already create stepchildren. I have a favorite in the company, so I think the audience could be, far more savvy to pick up, because it's a very simple thing to do. It's just common sense which one it could be. So definitely two more, and I think one is very obvious.
And I'm going to therefore wait that you elaborated what Taj stands for. I'm going to look forward to our next fireside chat when I can ask you what Ginger and Ama stand for.
Yeah, Ginger stands for a part of the profession I decided to go in 1981. I still call it a diploma in ginger and garlic, and that's 50% of it. Ama it stands for coming home, and it really is symbolic of homestays. But there are others also. I think it's an interesting phase. As difficult as it is financially for all of us, as difficult it is from a human point for all of us. But after every boom, there is a doom, and after every doom, at some point, there will be a boom. And I think brands that are well defined, brands again which have purpose, and brands very importantly which are agile and have kind of shown and demonstrated resilience and character during the pandemic, will evolve faster and stronger. And I hope a couple of our brands from our portfolio are also part of it.
Absolutely, and I'm sure they will be. But you made a very important point about the resilience and a different kind of dynamic, a different kind of dynamism during the pandemic issues. And tell me, that, and from a owner operator relationship in a crisis situation like that, how much of that goes into making a brand, or into making a success out of the very fundamentals of what you're doing, your ethic, your culture, all of which I believe contributes to brand?
So it's a very complex subject that you've touched upon. I think it could even take an hour of discussion if we wanted to have a very meaningful, detailed, and a thorough discussion. But to answer it briefly, the industry went from being asset heavy to asset light. The industry started differentiating in an owner and an operator. Now, in more sophisticated Western countries, there is an owner of the asset, there is an owner of the brand, and then there is a manager of the asset. So it's not even a two-party, it's a three-party relationship. And they're very successful third-party management companies, especially in the US and in parts of Europe, which do that quite successfully. However, when there is a crisis and you want to take the right decisions, it sometimes helps to own the asset. So I think there is no right answer if you took it over a 50 or 100-year period in managing of an owner and operator relationship in a crisis. I think we were blessed that we were coming from the background of being owner and operator of our hotels. So we had that background as good as 100% till 20 years ago, and we had it almost 67% till of our portfolio till 3 years ago, and we are down to almost 55% today. Now, but still, the majority of our portfolio was controlled by us, so we could take decisions which we thought were relevant, were right, and were ethical and correct, taking that long-term view that I spoke about.
Yes.
That becomes very difficult when you are dealing with 75 or 67% of third-party owners, or especially if you're 100% asset light. So I think this is that's why I said this is a very complex subject, and to keep the brands pure, to take the brands to a different level during a crisis, and I said to demonstrate character, it becomes very difficult if you don't control the asset and all you have is your management contract, those 20, 30, 40, 50 pages, depending on which brand we speak about, that is defining your relationship, you know, paragraph number such and such, such and such. That makes life very difficult, including it made it difficult for us because now we had 45%, although half of them were sitting in different joint ventures, which were promoted by us. So we did have, and you know, the individual single asset owners or even multi-property owners of 2-3 hotels, they don't have that kind of possibilities like a larger company like us or affiliation to a larger group like us would have. So it's a question of survival, and the survival stands in a different meaning, in a different context to who you are. And I think that way we feel a bit privileged to be a company with that kind of legacy or that kind of belonging to a group that makes us, you know, demonstrate resilience maybe in a very different way than a single property owner who has an asset of 150 crores or 200 crores. I mean, that is a bit unfair. That's why I said it's a very complex subject. We can go on for an hour, but for us it was difficult, like for everyone else. And Vijay, you will be, I don't know, surprised to know in this crisis, the larger you were, the higher were your problem. The larger you were, the more complex was the issue, because that one size fits all doesn't work. What we did in India, we couldn't do in Sri Lanka, we couldn't do in Maldives, in Dubai, in New York, in San Francisco, London. You know, it becomes very, very challenging. So, and there are companies which have scale of 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 hotels. So the problems are on a very different scale. And I think on the Indian subcontinent, of course, I think we had the biggest challenge compared to anyone else. And in such a situation, I would say it was good that the majority of our portfolio was still owned or leased, so that we were owning the P&L of the business. And I think going forward, it would be prudent to own some part of it. You know, this 100% asset light, maybe it's premature for semi-mature economies like India. It may work very well, you know, in US, in Germany, you know, in the UK, a lot of people got a lot of checks from the government. You know, they got even more money than they were actually earning. So the comparison is wrong. If people get unemployed, they have a lot of social benefits. They have a lot of, you know, that their unemployment insurance takes care of their salaries. But what do you do in India? You also have a social responsibility. So that makes these issues very, very complex. And at the end of the day, you are dealing with human beings and you have to deal with care.
Yeah, but and you know, also there have been owners who have added a lot of assets in the last 5 or 6 years, and all of them are under debt pressure with no relief coming in on the debt side from the governmental a little bit recently. It has been a severe challenge across chains. Now, we talked a little bit about owner-operator relationships, but I want to probe that a little bit more. What changes have you seen over the years, and what changes do you see are going to be the or what attributes are you going to expect to see as the essential attributes of a relationship going forward?
Between whom? The owner and operator, or between government or
owner-operators? Owner-operator.
Owner-operator. Well, I think the biggest change that has happened is that the industry has got used to having an owner and also being a manager, what it means to be a manager instead of owner and operator together. And that is one of the biggest change because of the private equity, private investment capital coming into hotels as an asset class. Now, the next phase that I see is how this asset class is going to get very sophisticated. Today, it is very fragmented and it is dealt by different people differently. So I always give this classical example, not knowing that you will ask me this question. So I always say there were, like, typically in the 20th century in India, there were 4, 5, 6 hotel groups at the most, and almost all of them were owner operator. Doesn't matter. The public sector, that time we were just called the Taj, and the others, right? Then came an era where you started seeing hotel investment coming in through builders. A lot of builders started building assets. And now came this crisis. After this, I would not be surprised if a lot of banks end up becoming owners of assets. And that had not happened. So we never had a situation which has happened, let's say, post reunification of Germany, when the Deutsche Interhotel, which was the East German public sector company, ended up having an owner in Deutsche Bank, and what is today called Areal Bank was called the DEPFA Bank. Now, this is not something the banks chose, but it is just you know, the aftermath of the reunification and the initial you know, kind of gang-ho attitude of everything would be wonderful, and it wasn't in what was the former East Germany, and then this collapse happened. So worldwide, we are seeing a very difficult situation for tourism, hospitality, and airline industry. So it will lead to certain situations. So it will have different kinds of ownership, and that ownership will be far more sophisticated than whatever we have seen in the past. It will require very different skill set going forward in managing that relationship, balancing the needs and wants of the owner with that of the manager, and everything will not change, but a lot will change. And
what
that
are the 2 core issues that you think will change? 1 or 2 core issues that you think will change?
Some of our favorite people that you and I know in common in hotel business, some of those they talk on return per square foot, your cost per square foot, your utility cost per square foot, not giving away what they call giving the store away in the American language of saying, everything just to please an upgrade for free and this for free and that for free. It will just get a bit more sophisticated. You will still get an upgrade, but maybe you use your points, your miles, or something. You're part of some program, or you're a real loyal customer. Buildings will not be built for glory, but they'll be built for return on investment. They'll be converted for return on investment. So it's very much today in the budget segment, but this will start happening in all segments, that your return on investment will be as relevant, your return to the owners will be as relevant as being customer centric, as focusing on diversity, as focusing on owner management. So I think some of these concepts which are relatively in the infancy phase will suddenly start maturing. I don't think they will see a growth phase. They will go straight from infancy to maturity. And this process has started happening already since 3 to 6 months. And I think we will start see this getting mature in maximum another 16 to 18 months.
Yes, and I think some of it will be good when the ownership is sophisticated. On the other side, we've seen a lot of ownerships that don't have the experience, and to my mind, that has been one of the reasons why franchising in India has been sort of limited or less successful. What is your view? Do you think your franchising will pick up in India in the future?
Yes, I think so. It will. It may take a few more years, but it is definitely inevitable, and it will come. And it depends what you would franchise. I mean, typically luxury hotels are not franchised, because that's where you want to control the brand. Why don't you franchise? Because luxury, the scale is more or less defined. I don't know of any luxury hotel brand with 500 or 1,000 hotels. It's like, 50, 100 is the kind of the limit. So that's why you don't franchise on the luxury front. You franchise really for scale, because then the franchise fees and the model of undistributed operating expense of a franchise system makes it profitable and creates a brand awareness around your brand. So luxury hotel could be 1 or 2 or even 5 hotels in the world, and you could still be very well known. So that's not, so it depends on which segment of the market, but franchising will come. And it may be a few years away, because at the moment we had this COVID, and in the post-COVID era, it will not be that easy to invest in a franchise company than to actually invest in brands with proven track record, especially on the home front. So I think the domestic brands have an advantage out there in all segments. Also, they have a better understanding, and also that is their focus. Their focus is not somewhere in Honolulu or Hawaii or whatever. It's the focus is here, and they would understand that the barrier to entry is probably at the lowest point now than it would ever be in 5 years from now, or was 5 years ago. So yes, that phase is over. I think franchising will come, and it's good that way. I think it's good for the business. And when does franchising happen? Franchising happens when capital starts coming into the industry. So the important news is not franchising. The most important news is what will be the sources of capital coming into hotel investments in the next 3, 5, 10, 12 years, and what will ensure that not only we have domestic sources of capital, but we also get international sources of capital coming into India. And then franchise is just a consequence. A management contract is a consequence. A lease is a consequence.
And you've given me a perfect segue into a question I have. In India, we still lack institutional capital. How do you see that playing out? Because without institutional capital, the scale in the industry, we've got 52,000 rooms across the industry in India on the branded segment, and a couple of them probably going out of operation soon. So you're already struggling. Actually, not a couple. We're probably going to lose quite a bit of rooms and hotels. I would say even 25,000 rooms and hotels. So with that, the size is small. Without institutional capital, it becomes even more difficult. What does India need to do to get that institutional capital?
Yeah, I think it's not what it takes. I think, let's put it this way. Number one is the focus on tourism, which the Honorable Prime Minister has already said, and with the recent changes, it seems we are getting more importance with the new Secretary Tourism, with the new Cabinet Minister, because we had only a State Minister, now we have two State Ministers also. So it will depend on the policy making, which will attract investment, which is called, in marketing jargon, you call it the industry attractiveness. So first of all, the industry has to become attractive. The second thing that becomes interesting for the institutional capital to come in is you treat them as institutional investors. Institutional capital cannot end up becoming employers of people working in a restaurant or in the housekeeping. That is the basic fundamental thing, that all they are interested is in some form of fixed return per month or per quarter or per annum, and they are not interested in some variable return and some revenue share or some kind of a management contract. So at least this is how the institutional capital works in the Western Hemisphere. And because of these reasons, as hotel is just one single piece of large real estate, they don't have the administrative expense, which you would have if you had a shopping center, you have center management. If you had offices, you would have another company doing office management, for the utilities, back of house, all the, construction and other amenities. You could do a triple net lease with a hotel operator, and he pays all the expenses and just sends you a check. So your gross return and your net return is the same. So this is the third part of it. The fourth part would be, how does the government facilitate when they are giving land? Sometimes I wonder, recently a paper landed on my table from one of the union territories for a 3-year lease, renewable after every 3 years, and you should go and invest. Now, who is going to do that? Now, you talk about the institutional capital must be bankable, because the capital is also coming there from somewhere. So anything less than 67 years or ideally 99 years is a non-starter, and we come up with some ideas like 33 years, 40, 50 years, including the time to develop and build. Why not 50 years from the day the hotel is open? So there are so many small things. The sum of this equals the industry attractiveness for institutional capital. The day we get even to 60-70% of it, the rest will follow. And I hope it does that, because it is a very fascinating industry. It's fascinating real estate and has consistently delivered premium returns globally. And there is no reason why that should not happen on the Indian subcontinent.
Yes, and because of the lack of institutional capital, we also have a lack of depth on secondary market transactions, and of course there is the huge valuation issue. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to change the subject a little bit. IHCL is South Asia's largest sort of hospitality company. I'm sure that is a matter of privilege, benefit, but also responsibility. What does it mean for you to have that status, but also that onus?
So firstly, I must thank you again from the start of the conversation and now, because I'm glad if a very reputed or the most reputed consulting company from India says that we are the largest hospitality company. I think we had lost that title for a few years. So in fact, we have a portfolio of 221 hotels today, of which 56 are in the pipeline and 165 in operation. And today we are sending a press release of opening, I don't know, 6 or 7 Ama homestays in Munnar area, which takes it also close to 40 homestays in operation, which we don't count in these numbers because it's misleading. I think the benefits are very clear. The benefits is the legacy. The benefits is the culture. The benefits is of being part of Tata Group, which I mentioned a few times already. The benefits is all our stakeholder relationships, which are a part of the larger ecosystem. The benefits also include things like our very, very iconic brand portfolio, whether it's our palaces or it's our safaris or it's our Taj Mahal Palace Mumbai or Taj Mahal Delhi or Taj Mahal. And these are just wonderful assets both in India and outside of India. Whether it's the pier in New York or the St. James with Buckingham Gate in London. I mean, it's a great, great iconic portfolio. And of course, the brand equity. However, as you rightly said, there are a lot of challenges. So if your legacy is a strong benefit or is a very big strength, it's also a challenge because you're dealing with a lot of history and things that you do and you don't do. So it depends. In a certain situation, it can be a difficult one. And I would not say there are too many challenges because I think we have been a bit more blessed as a company over, as I said, over 100 years, it's been like this. However, there is a challenge of constantly making a difference, staying ahead of the game and not falling back again to number 2 or 3. Because of some international global mergers, things happen which are beyond your reasonable control, and suddenly you could be again back to square one after doing all the hard work. So that's a challenge to constantly think about it. But more important for me and my colleagues in the top management is our job is very simple. We have to hand over what we got in a better state that we took, and this next one and the next one, they all have to do the same, and that's how you stay ahead of the game. But it's also about making a difference to the society, which is really your purpose as defined by Jamshedji Tata when he formed the company. And we are the oldest operating company of Tata Group. So there is no company which is in operation today and was formed before us. It is about your responsibilities include living those values of trust, awareness, and joy. It includes dealing in business ethics. It includes every day defining operational excellence, whether now we call it our culture of Tajness for the guests or the culture of Tajness and how we treat our associates. It is continuous evolution of your brandscape, not a revolution. I mean, we're not in a race to get to 50 or 100 brands. It's not the quantity, but the quality of the brands that one has. And it is also about doing all this. When we do that, how you keep managing your pipeline, how you keep growing the portfolio, but built around the governance, built around the ESG, your environmental, social, and governance, which should be second. And I think that's our responsibility, and never to forget that we are custodians of a very important legacy, and we need to act every day and each hour, each minute in a day in that form, whether we are on duty or not on duty. So I think that's the biggest responsibility we have.
I think that's a very deep responsibility than just the operations or the financial aspect that one would normally attribute it to. But let me then take that and examine one thread of it. When you have that sort of deep legacy responsibility, you also have a responsibility for periodic change, because change is inevitable, and change within the parameters of your legacy. Now, how as a CEO do you view that change? I mean, how much of it is foresight? How much is strategy? How much has to be driven? How much is CEO driven? How much is a point where you let the employees own the change? What is your strategy for that?
Vijay, I would love to get a better answer. You actually gave it yourself. It's the team that drives the change. Change is the only constant. A bit of it comes from the CEO, and it is always how the top behaves. You know, the fish always stinks from the head, and you have to carry the team. And within that framework, if you can carry the team, if you can carry the people with you, change will happen. And change has to be meaningful. If it is meaningful, things will start happening. Let me give you an example of a brand which we launched last year called Cumin. It all started with the purpose. The purpose was to serve the community. And we started the meal service in all the hospitals in Mumbai, right? The Nair Hospital and the Sion Hospital. And we were doing around 9,000 meals, and they said, we want to give it also to migrant workers, which was like suddenly the number went up by 35,000. So it became almost like 45,000 meals. At the peak, it was 50,000. 6 weeks later, my boss called me, or our group chairman, and said, when you're doing this, can you not bring your cuisine to people's houses? That's all he said. And then the team got together. This is the middle of the lockdown. You know, this is around the first phase, when we all thought the lockdown will end by end of April, including you and I. I remember we said, "Ye June tak theek ho jayega," right? And we
didn't say which year though. We didn't say which year. May, June to theek hai.
That's so we got together. People had never seen each other because we got this with Tata Digital. We had to get packaging teams, we had to get third-party suppliers, we had to get meal boxes. And then we had to get a brand registered. We decided to go for our own brand. We decided to go not to use the Taj name, not to use a Vivanta or whatever. Create an absolutely new name, register the new name. All this was done in a period of 6 weeks when the app was launched. And 25th of May, we were up and running with Cumin. And we recently celebrated on 25th of June, 1 year also of the app, which was launched a month later. And from what started as a service to the community, in which we served 3 million meals, 3 million meals in Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Coimbatore, you know, all the places. And this year, after the second wave, we were able to do another 1 million meals. Last year, the 3 million went as Taj and Taj Sats, our flight kitchen unit. And this year, they all went as Cumin meals. So in all 4 million meals, you serve the purpose, you do the right thing, and without knowing how one thing leads to the other, you do something good, and suddenly it starts happening and things start rolling. And we're very proud today that we have this very solid, we've been able to build a very solid revenue level for Cumin in home delivery, where everybody was questioning why we are doing that. Then everybody was questioning very recently, why are we doing Cumin food trucks? So because Cumin is Cumin. Cumin is not Vivanta. Cumin is not Taj. It's a different business focus area for us, which will belong to those ancillary businesses, which will form maybe 10-15% of our revenue, but may drive more than 50% of the margin from those 10% of the revenue. So,
and it has become something which is not just a pandemic level or a pandemic period product. It's going to have a longevity of itself.
Exactly. So that's how I said, no CEO can do it alone. No small team can do it alone. It's a lot of people. There is people involved from IT, people from distribution, people from sales and marketing, people from licensing, people from legal trying to register a brand mark, a brand and the marks, people trying to, you know, do the marketing effort behind it. So it's the chefs, the kitchens, the packing. I mean, it's a lot of people who were involved, and you can imagine the resistance, or definitely a questioning was there. Is that what we are going to do in five-star hotels going forward? But if the purpose was true to the philosophy of the founder, these things just happen far easier, because it all started with a totally different initiative, and which took an evolution into a brand.
That's excellent. That is really, I mean, it's good to hear that entire sort of background to Cumin. It's not just something that happens so readily or so easy. Let me ask you a different thing. You know, when I introduced you, I said that you had an experience of India, Europe, then Germany, specifically, of course, within Europe, and then back to India. Indian hospitality has certain characteristics. Western hospitality has certain attributes. What crosses? What crosses well? What can India teach Western hospitality? What can Western hospitality teach India?
A lot. So I think, to make it very simple, the kind of service philosophy in India, the kind of genuineness, the warmth, the service from the heart, the emotional connect is very, very strong. Let's say it's not India. If we divide the world into, let's say, three areas: the Americas, Europe, and Asia. So what I learned from Carlson, or the American thing, is wonderful marketing. I think the American way of marketing, creating brands, consistently delivering the similar message till it sings, I think it was a very good learning. From the Europeans, I learned the process management. So the management skills of Europe, the marketing of US, and the emotional quotient, the emotional values and the traditional values of Asia. If you marry the three, or if you mix the three, you get a different sort of a Bloody Mary, which has that, you know, it has the required vodka, the tomato juice, the salt, and the Angusta bitter, or whatever you wanted to put into it, or the lemon, but it just works very, very well. So I think there is not a right or a wrong answer. There are so many brands that have been created in Asia, whether in Southeast Asia or in India now, the Taj getting the world's strongest brand recognition. And there's so many great companies, very large companies created on the Western Hemisphere. If we took all of them and mixed, the company that could be formed, which had all these three, would be, I think, the one to watch out for the next 50 or 100 years. And I hope we are one of those.
Wow, I mean, yeah, it's always good to pick the best, you know, pick the good of everything, and it's the challenge is to synthesize all of that. I guess you're sort of partially answered my question, but I'm still going to leave that question, or I'm going to ask you that question. In terms of hospitality education in India, what needs to change? You said it's the mix of marketing, process, service. That's one short aspect.
This is a very interesting one, and I'm glad, you know, these things you and I did not discuss, because I don't know who all are listening, but I would share this with the audience. You know, when I went to hotel school, I'd never had a glass of wine. Actually, I'd never had a bottle of wine in my hand. But I knew the best how to narrate every grape, every wine, how to open a champagne bottle which I had not opened, and how to present the cork, and, you know, all those things. Because in our hotel schools in those days, you know, early 80s, that's when I went, or in the 70s, we had those empty bottles in the F&B class with some water or something. You know, these were not real waters, but most of us knew everything by heart. So if you said a German wine like Liebfrau Milch, which is a very ordinary, simplistic white wine from Germany, then we even knew the translation, which meant it is milk of a blessed mother, because that's what a Lieb and a Frau and a Milch would be, right? So of course, then we got very lucky because there was non-aligned meets and the Commonwealth heads of state. So when I was in second year or third year of hotel school, we got exposed to real wines. So I think what happens, and this is not about hospitality industry only, I would say generally in the industry, we would be far more superior if we had some form of combination of practical education, which is the hallmark of some of the European countries, combined with real, classroom education. And I think there we have lacked. We have improved a lot. We've definitely improved a lot. We ourselves run a school in Aurangabad since 30, 40 years. So we know that. I'm associated with a lot of schools still in Europe. But till we get there, what we tried to do as our contribution in the last few years was creating scholarships for our people to go and study. So we created 6 scholarships with ESSEC. 2 of the first students have graduated. Last year we had to withhold the 2 because of COVID. So, but the 2-year course, and I insisted they go for 2 years course so that they get to understand France, they get to understand Paris, they get to understand that culture, that they experience the Beaujolais Nouveau, how it is celebrated, etc. Similarly, we did it with Le Roy in Switzerland, and we are working with several others across the globe to create these platforms for education, mainly to give that exposure. Our people are very bright, and when they go and get exposed to that culture, to the spirit of collaboration, I would say the 3 things, one we are very good at is resilience, but the 2 others which we need, one for lack of infrastructure and other because of a large population does not work that well, is resilience, agility, and collaboration are the 3 things I feel are important. And agility is the need of the hour. I mean, we have to take very quick decision, and collaboration. Instead of competition all the time, collaboration. And that culture of collaboration will help us advance as an industry, as a nation. And we will do our bit, and we will very soon announce the next few scholarships, or even some kind of courses which we are working on as an organization to come up with like a dual system of education, 6 months classroom, 6 months practical, and you're a trained barman, or you're a trained cook, or you're a trained patissier, so very, very focused, and also driven by the fact that this is employability factor increases. So people actually from day one can start producing results. So I think that's one thing on the education side we can improve.
Which is I think a general complaint that people who come out of hotel schools, their practical experience and their employability tends to be a little bit low. They have to be further trained. Let me ask you, let's go back to the customer, because ultimately the customer is most important for us. And the customer also is evolving, both in demographics, in age profile, in sophistication, but also in the kind of products that they are being exposed to in India. How important is that conversation between the hotel and the customer, where the hotel learns what the customer wants and the hotel trains the customer to understand services and products and mature themselves?
The customers' needs and wants keep changing, which is normal because that change has become so fast. So you can never communicate enough. So I would say just a few things. The voice of customer or customer centricity is one of the keys, especially in our business. We are in the hospitality business, so customer is a key. You have to not just rely on NPS and trust you. I think one danger that the industry faces with digital is the personal contact to customer, which we had very strong in the 70s, 80s, 90s, people knew their customers, their families, their children, grandchildren by name. The way the world has moved on is, one family is sitting together, then they're all on their own iPhones. Nobody's talking to each other. So that is also reflected in the societal behavior and the way we conduct ourselves. So I would encourage people, not just your customer is your customer, even your supplier is your customer, even your employees, when they're not working in the hotel, they're going to another hotel, they're also your customers. So I think having that relationship capital, that is given as much importance as digitalization, as finance, as operational excellence. I think building those relationships with your customers, which are different, as I said, different kinds of people in different times, is very important. And I actually feel very proud because I think definitely the Taj does that quite well. I mean, I did not come on your webinar to talk too much about just Taj, that we are the best. But this definitely is one thing, as there have been case studies written on it by Horwath, and now INSEAD is doing one. What is it that makes the Taj employees, managers, executives so exemplary that they would even give their lives when a 2611 happens? So I think building that connect, whether you build it emotionally, do it through personal interaction, you do it through digital, but only digital will not work. You have to keep the balance.
And you find that the younger generations of people joining you, managers joining you, are open to doing this, or they have to be sort of guided towards doing this?
Again, here the legacy works in your favor because you are such a legacy company. You have the balance is not is not tilted towards the younger ones. So you have people who are 1 or 2 or 3 years in service. They will always stay in minority going forward. And in a Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Colaba or in Land's End, the majority of the people would be 20+ years in the property, some 40, some 35, 38. So that helps to integrate, that the young don't lose what they bring as value to the table, but they're also able to learn from the elderly, from the more experienced, or from the veterans. Some of those fine tunings of the business. I have a favorite here. He retired, a guy called Dominic, at the chambers in Taj Mahal Palace. I said, please don't retire. Come for 5-7 days a month, because he has an aura around him when he makes the snake's coffee or he does the crepe Suzette. So the way he talks, the way his body moves, and anybody can do that. Even I can do that. I did it in my career. But it is so charming that you can't replace that. Young person may come with fancy and do, but that whole experience is so much more poetic, is so much more empathetic or sympathetic, for the lack of a better word, that again, it's the mix. It's not young versus old, it's both together.
Both together, yeah, absolutely. Future of luxury hotels in India and dedicated wellness retreats, or the need for wellness zones with hotels. How do you see this evolving?
Very strong. Actually, a lot of Indians go to Austria and to Germany, in the Black Forest area for those wellness retreats and pay a fortune for fasting or for not eating anything throughout the day and just living on tea for a week. We have tea, we have wellness, we have yoga, we have Ayurveda. Might as well do it here. Why you have to go all the way there to do it? So there is a defined market for it, and I mean, this is just one aspect of it. There is mindfulness is another aspect. Yoga retreats is another aspect of it. Beauty is again becoming more and more important. I mean, the number of people, especially during the pandemic, who took to exercising, walking, using the treadmill, cycling, or becoming conscious on building immunity. These are trends that are here to stay, and I think we will see more and more evolution of resorts. So the existing resorts will adapt and embrace some of these practices, and the new ones that will come will be built with a larger version of these kind of facilities.
Will any of the
existing one is difficult? Sorry, go ahead. No, I said in an existing one is difficult to change everything.
Will any of the larger chains go into a wellness retreat, a real wellness retreat kind of a product, or do you think that's going to be left? Today it's more independent based.
No, the chains would go, but they'll be like one-offs. I doubt if hotel brands will be built around, with the larger chains, because you have to have scale. You have to do at least, to be significant or to be relevant, you have to have at least 20 alone in India. If not 20, at least 15 or 16. Now that may take a long time before that gets done, and that on a resort. So there will be a little bit of a quick fix in the short and medium term, and then there'll be those aspirational resorts, as have been also built in the past. So we will have those, like we have near Rishikesh one, we have a Taj in Rishikesh. We have in Bankable a very large resort, but it is less sophisticated in terms of having a doctor on site, having all those kind of things. So we came up with a promotion recently called Energize, that is, energizing your inside through foods which were done with Arya Vaidyasala, the Ayurveda Institute, which are supposed to boost your immunity. You have a doctor, check your blood pressure, every day you get a different massage, but that is all happening in the same premises. What we're talking here about is experiential saunas. You can have 5, 6 different kinds of saunas, different kinds of water therapies. It's not just a whirlpool, but different kinds of hydrotherapy, different kind of pools with water treatment, with different kinds of salt, whether it's the one which is coming from Israel, for example.
So, okay. What about luxury hotels? What about luxury hotels? What do you see the future for luxury hotels?
Very bright, brighter than ever before.
That's very good to know. I think that says it all from a luxury hotel point of view, because there's a lot of anxiety that with rates and the kind of travel patterns, will luxury hotels be supported? I believe they will, and I'm so happy to see that you have a similar view.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely convinced that even more strong than we ever thought it would be. That's my view, and we've seen that. Whenever travel opens up in India, whether it was between November and February, all our luxury properties were full. We don't have any foreigners coming in, but the Lake Palace in Udaipur is still doing 35,000-40,000 as rate. It's not changing, and a lot of resorts, not just us, with any company which has resorts, I think it's good, and resorts are mostly upper upscale or luxury, or definitely upscale, and they are all trading at either pre-COVID level and some even superior. Some of our properties are at a higher than pre-COVID level in terms of average rates.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just one disclaimer: only when they open up. Whenever they shut down, then it's a problem.
Yeah, but then its room's not available, so it's all right. Okay, last 2 questions, Puneet. I think it would be difficult to end this conversation without asking you for a quick word of your view on the future. What do you see the future? Short term, medium term, long term, and you can do it in 2 sentences.
It's very difficult. See, the future of hospitality industry is bright. Travel is a fundamental human need, and every time when there was no curfew, there was no second wave, there was no this thing, the numbers have demonstrated that we have had to tell people, please maintain social distancing, leave the mall roads of the hill station, and because people are going to go away, and that is very normal, and people spending time working out of hotels, working out of homestays. Having said that, where we stand today, it is very, very difficult, and reminds me of a quote from Longfellow in A Psalm of Life. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, and heart within and God overhead. And who am I telling this to? Vijay Thacker, who is maybe in our industry the biggest believer of God, and it shows on your forehead every day, right? So that's what we can say. Pray for our industry, pray for a revival. And once that happens, thrival is not a way. We will all thrive as an industry. I'm quite sure. I'm very, very, very confident. And I hope that answers the question.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you for time frames, although that's a request to ask you whether it will be 23, 24, but who knows? So I'm going to ask you the last question. What are your 3 key mantras for success?
Oops. I have 3 words and 3 mantras. 3 mantras I gave already. I said resilience, agility, and collaboration. And the 3 words would be never ever give up, or never give up.
Perfect. And all 3 of them, and the 3 words, the 6 of them, actually summarize the view for the future. The need of what needs to be done for the future, and the view for the future. Never give up, because there's a golden period ahead of us, right, in my view. Okay. Puneet, thank you so much for your time. I think this has been a wonderful conversation, a conversation which has been a little bit different from, statistics and trends and, short-term futures, etc. I hope people have enjoyed the variety of conversation that's come in here. It's been a lot of learning that you've given us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your inputs, and hopefully we'll get you some other day again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you everybody for staying with us, and I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Good day. Stay safe and stay well.